I was very negative about California until 20 years ago. I thought this was the place where you went and your brain rotted because you were sitting in your hot tub and drinking good California wines, and everybody talked in New Age vocabulary, and I had no idea what California was really like until I met a Californian just about 20 years ago. She was a writer too. We met at an artist colony in New Hampshire, in New England. And about a year after that, I came to Santa Kruzu for the first time. I'm looking out at it there. And it immediately felt like home to me, Northern California.
Važnost činjenice da je rođen sredinom prošlog veka u Srednjoj Americi u porodici srednje klase.
You grew up in St. Louis, in Mid-America.
I did. I'm a deep Midwesterner.
Yes. So what does it mean that you're a Midwesterner?
I think for me, however, what was true in the 1960s and 1970s is that childhood was slightly prolonged. When I went to college, I started meeting kids who'd grown up in Manhattan, and they were so advanced. They'd started having sex when they were 14, they were doing drugs when they were 15, they were drinking heavily throughout high school. They were sophisticated, they were worldly.
And you were surprised?
I had no idea. It had never occurred to me that not everyone had as protected a childhood as I did. It was like all the things that happened to a lot of kids when they're 16 didn't happen to me until I was 18. And to get 2 extra years of childhood, you could say it permanently damaged me, but it was also a great gift, I think.
What books helped you to shape yourself?
The first books I read, it was not just all the good people are heroes and the bad people are villains, and we love our hero because the hero is noble and good and always does the right thing. No, it was the heroes in these books were often doing terrible things, exactly the wrong thing. And that seemed to me, that spoke to where I was, because I felt I was always doing something terrible. I was always doing something wrong in my own way. And I do think children know what it's like to feel guilty. But that's of course a mark. You can almost say it's the definition of a serious novel. The heroes aren't entirely good, and the villains aren't entirely bad. That is what literature at the character level is defined by.
Kad je bila mala, Pip se zadovoljavala nejasnim pričama, ali od 11. godine počela je toliko uporno da zapitkuje, da je majka pristala da joj ispriča celu priču. U davna, pradavna vremena imala je drugo ime i živjela drugačijim životom u nekoj državi koja nije bila Kalifornija i udala se za čoveka koji je, kako je saznala tek pošto se Pip rodila, bio veoma sklon nasilju. Fizički ju je zlostavljao, ali je bio veoma pažljiv da joj bol nanosi tako da ne ostavi vidljivije tragove, a psihička tortura bila je još gora. Ubrzo je živjela kao talac njegovog maltretiranja i možda bi i ostala u braku sve dok je jednog dana ne ubije, da njega nije toliko razjarivao plač male Pip da se uplašila da će ju ubiti. Pokušala je da zajedno sa Pip pobegne od njega, ali je uspeo da ih nađe, izvrši psihološki pritisak na nju i natera ih da se vrate.
In your latest novel, your main character is Purity and she's called Pip. And Pip is nickname of Charles Dickens's narrator in The Great Expectations. He's orphan. And your Purity, your Pip, she's not orphan, but she doesn't know who her father is. Do you want to suggest that secrets define our identity?
Secrets have two functions. First of all, I don't tell everyone I meet everything. So I know things that the people around me don't know. And I suspect that my sense of self depends on my knowing things that other people don't. secrets are also, conversely, how you establish trust with another person. Again, if there are no secrets, then you have nothing, there's no place to go with a friendship. Well, I know everything about you, so why do we need to have a conversation? Where does this friendship go? In real life, I have a secret opinion of Neda. I'm not going to tell you, but I might tell somebody who knows you. I'm not going to tell Neda, but here's my real opinion of her. She doesn't know this. This is a secret. And that person says, I have the same feeling. And you want to know something? Yeah. And that is what is creating this bond and this trust. And now we have a secret. So there's been a lot of talk about secrecy in this era of transparency and stupid people in Silicon Valley telling us that the world would be better off if no one had any secrets. And it seemed to me that two of the most important things about being a human being, having a sense of self as a discrete thing that is private, and having an ability to establish these lines of trust by way of secrets with other people, those are really, really threatened if you imagine a world in which no one can possibly have a secret.
Iako pripada generaciji pisaca koja stvara u vreme procvata postmodernizma, prisutnog u njegovim ranim radovima, Franzen ga se vrlo brzo odriče zbog fluidne strukture i nepostojanosti likova, sa željom da stvori složenog i životnog književnog junaka. Odlazi u New York sa uverenjem da je to grad u kome se postaje pisac i gde 1988. objavljuje svoj prvi roman 27. grad, a zatim Snažni potres, knjige koje osvajaju pažnju kritike, ali ne i čitalačke publike.
I have to say my first novel did better than I had ever dared to hope it would. What happened with the second novel was so disheartening, and it came at a bad time in my life when my marriage was falling apart. My father was getting very sick. My mother was miserable. I was running out of money. A lot of things were coming together, but definitely the fact that the second novel had disappeared without a trace made me ask, why would I write novels? It's a question my parents had been asking all along. They meant it partly financially, but they also meant it, how is this serving the world? How is this good for the world? You're just making up lies and getting paid for it. That doesn't seem like a good thing to do with your life. So yeah, I went through this long, many-year process that resulted, among other things, in a long essay in Harper's, which I call Why Bother, in which I essentially let go of the notion of social responsibility in fiction, because I realized it didn't make any sense, at least not in America, and I also knew from empirical evidence that that's not why people were reading the kind of books I liked and wanted to write. I'd accepted the fact that the audience for literature has always been small. So I started writing for a small audience of people who wanted to read the kind of book I wanted to. And, of course, the big irony, that book turned out to be The Corrections, which was immediately taken to be a social novel of exactly the sort that I'd said I was no longer interested in writing. And instead
But you are interested in writing a social novel. In The Corrections, you write about a middle-class America. You focus on the dark side of the family life.
The book is not undark, I will admit. There's an old man who is losing his mind, and then he dies. Not the cheeriest story. There are instances of emotional cruelty. People are not well behaved. Laws are broken. So it's dark in that sense, but I would like to stress that that book, like all of my novels, was written essentially to be funny. It's a comedy about a Midwestern family.
It's a satirical saga.
There is still satire in that book, but satire and comedy are also very different. Satire has a specific social function. You are making fun of something that you disapprove of. I didn't succeed in removing satire from my work until Freedom. It became a conscious goal, no more satire. Because the satirist, to be funny, to satirize something, has to know what's right and what's wrong. And I think the appropriate place for the novelist is a state of unknowing what's right and what's wrong.
Alfred je mahnuo rukom prema svojoj plavoj fotelji, koja je pod tapetarovim zaštitnim najlonom ličila na nešto što može na šleperu da se odveze u elektranu. Tresao se od neverice, nemoćan da poveruje da je Inid zaboravila tu ključnu prepreku njenim stavovima, tu opsežnu smetnju njenim planovima. Kao da se sva nesloboda u kojoj je proveo 7 decenija svog života otelotvorila u toj 6 godina staroj, ali suštinski novoj fotelji. Cerio se, a lice mu je blistalo od užasne savršenosti njegove logike. A šta ćemo onda sa foteljom? Rekao je. Šta sa foteljom?
It's not easy to say what connects people in your prose. Is it love? Is it hate? Is it rage?
One of the reasons I have resisted the idea that I write family novels is that, yes, the characters are all related because they're part of the same family, but they don't spend much time being a family. They're off, especially in the corrections, the whole family gets together. The five Lamberts only get together for about 4 pages at the very end of the book. So the actual workings of families is not something I write that much about. I don't think there's a single scene in Freedom where the entire Berglund family is together, all 4 of them.
I'm talking about their relationships.
Well, their relationships, yes, but I don't want to be disingenuous. Yes, I guess I'm a family novelist, but families are interesting for their own sake. They're immediately full of an emotional charge. I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is say, this character is his mother, and we all know, oh my God, that's his mother, and there's this kind of, it's immediately fraught. There's stuff going on just simply because of a mother-son relationship. And everybody knows, you know, if you know what a mother-son relationship is like, whether you've been in one or not. We all know that. So it's a very efficient way to quickly get into something interesting. I don't know anything about family life, but I do know what it's like to have brothers and what it's like to see myself in them and to see my parents in them and them in my parents. And so it's just it's this wonderful little microcosm of intense significance. And I would argue that it is the novelist's job to create as much significance in the pages of the book as possible. The more ways you can get meaning going. And again, family is just this incredibly efficient way to build in all this meaning.
We have some great female characters, like Enid or Patty or Annabelle. I'm talking about mothers figures.
Mothers, yes.
Yes. But they are rather possessive mothers, and rather selfish mothers.
They have powerful needs, those mothers. They need things. They need things from their children. And they need and try to get things from their children that maybe the children shouldn't be asked to give them. I think that is a common thread there, yes. Why? Well, my own mother was that way a little bit, you could say. She was a very complicated person, but She was frustrated for much of her life. She was frustrated in the way a lot of smart women were in the 50s and 60s. It really just wasn't possible for her to have a career. She was very, very smart, a good businesswoman, much better businesswoman than my father was a businessman. You know, she had all this excess emotion, excess intelligence, excess energy, and there she was stuck in this house. Well, the kitchen floor has been washed, dinner is in the oven, now what? Well, so a lot of it got focused on the kids, and then I was alone in the house with her for 8 years. So a lot of it for a few years until I became a teenager was focused only on me. That was intense. Made me appreciate how valuable privacy is. Made me an intensely private person, just to keep something of my own to myself.
I think your characters, they are not good, but they are not bad.
Thank you. That's what I tried for.
Yeah. In fact, it seems to me they are not bad enough to be really bad, or not good enough to be really good.
Well, I think that's true of most people, except for saints and sociopaths. So I'm just a realist writer.
Wolf je osnovao projekat Sunčeva svetlost 2000. godine. Isprva se baveći samo odabranim nemačkim zločinima, ali je ubrzo proširio svoju delatnost na društvenu nepravdu i otrovne tajne, svuda po svetu. Jedino što je Wolf krio od javnosti bio je identitet onih koji ga finansiraju, što je izazvalo terabajt ili 2 vatrene online prepirke o njegovoj nedoslednosti. A jedino što se u vezi sa njim moglo smatrati barem blago nepriličnim, bio je njegov vatreno suparnički odnos sa Assangeom. Wolf je voleo da izaziva Assangea tako što bi ocrnio njegove metode i privatni život, dok se Assange samo pravio da Wolf ne postoji.
In Purity, at the beginning, there is a 19th century setup, and then you jump to the 21st century, to Bolivia, to Sunlight Project, which is a rival organization to WikiLeaks. So do you play with both of them, with realism and modernism?
Absolutely, absolutely, because modernism cannot, once modernism was in the world, you couldn't ignore it. So I have no interest in simply following an existing form in a novel. Every novel has to have something formally new going on for me. This is getting back to your question about Pip. Why did I mention Pip? Why did I give her the name Pip? Well, there were several reasons. What would she shorten purity to? She's also a little bit like a friend of mine whose last name was Pap. And somehow purity, Pap, and then there was Dickens's Pip. But it is a staple of 19th century literature, particularly Anglo literature, the secret, particularly the secret parent, the secret of one's parentage. It seemed like a great moment to push on that convention of the secret because of what has happened to secrecy in the last 10 years, what technology is doing to the whole notion of secrecy.
When you name your novels Purity or Freedom, what do you mean by freedom and purity today?
Freedom, I just grabbed that word out of the headlines and stamped it on a proposal for a novel because I was so angry at George Bush for saying things like the terrorists hate our freedom. American political discourse, it had come to mean something very, very specific and politically hateful to me. It had been appropriated by the Republicans, who are not my party, and particularly by the then President Bush. So I was just irritated. And so there I had the title. God damn it, I'm gonna call the book Freedom. And I didn't know I didn't have a book. So then I started thinking about it. And all I knew was that it was going to be an ironic title.
As well as purity?
Purity, yes. Purity was a little bit more, there again I was angry.
Well, it's good for you to be angry, I think.
I think it is probably good to be angry. It's good that it's good because I don't seem to be able to help it. I was angry at the idiotic notions of religious purity that are behind fundamentalism, both here and in militant radical Islam. But it seemed to me purity was a wish for young people. Young people annoy me. I annoyed myself when I was a young person, so I have the right to be annoyed with them now. The idea that you can somehow wash away all the sins of your parents and be morally beyond reproach. You know, most of the people killing themselves and killing other people in the name of advancing an Islamic state, those are young people. Older people understand, you know what? I once wanted to be pure, but actually, you just can't get through life that way. So at every turn, I found myself annoyed by purists of all kinds. And I thought, another ironic title.
Yes, it's not easy to be pure in the impure world, in fact.
It's not desirable to be pure in an impure world.
You think?
Absolutely. It's a childish fantasy that you can be pure. If it's impossible, it seems like it's ipso facto undesirable because it is unhealthy, if not immoral, to desire something that is impossible.
Looking back at your heroes, is freedom something that comes from the outside world or from our inner world? Because I think your heroes, they choose not to be free.
Well, I would not want to be in a position of arguing with someone else's interpretation of my work. I'm making fun of an American conception of freedom, which is, I think, childish and stupid. Yes, constitutionally, certain freedoms that we are guaranteed, those are very adult and those are very good. But the idea that nobody tells me what I have to do, I can buy anything I want, the more choices I have, the freer I am, the better everything is. All of that is just wrong, which is why, even though by most metrics there's less regulation, better guarantees of civil liberties, any other metric of political and economic freedom in this country than in most other countries in the world, happiness levels in the United States are down at like 45th in the world. And interestingly, it's precisely a number of countries, many of them in Northern Europe, which the right in America would say have given up their liberties. Those are the happiest countries. So there again, this notion of free, 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 I can do whatever I want, I can buy what I want, I can, you know, it's a dumb consumerist notion of freedom, and it does not actually correlate with happiness. In fact, for me, it inversely correlates with happiness.
Opšte prihvaćena ekonomska teorija, kako marksistička, tako i ona o slobodnom tržištu, rekao je Volter, podrazumeva da je ekonomski rast uvek nešto pozitivno. Stopa rasta BDP-a od 1 ili 2% smatra se umerenom, a stopa rasta stanovništva od 1% poželjno. Pa ipak nastavio je, ako se te brojke prate kroz više od 100 godina, rezultati su zastrašujući. Svetsko stanovništvo doseže 18 milijardi, a potrošnja energije postaje desetostruko veća nego danas. A ako se pogleda još 100 godina stabilnog rasta, brojke su jednostavno nemoguće. Stoga rimski klub pokušava da pronađe racionalnije i humanije načine za usporavanje razvoja, nego što je to puko uništavanje planete i puštanje da svi pomremo od gladi ili da se poubijamo. Rimski klub, umješala se Abigail, je li to nešto kao italijanski Playboy klub? Ne, tiho odgovorio Walter. To je grupa ljudi koja dovodi u pitanje našu zaokupljenost razvojem. Hoću reći, svi su tako opsednuti razvojem, ali kad čovjek razmisli o tome, zazreo organizam. Razvoj je u suštini rak, zar ne?
You write a lot about our world, about freedom, about politics, about new technologies, a lot about ecological issues, and you're in fact very critical.
I've become a bird guy and was always concerned about the environment, and now it's personal because I love birds so much. And also I've been following science all my life. I mean, I was intended to be a scientist, and it was an accident that I became a writer. So I've been thinking about climate change since the early 90s. It's in the Corrections, which was written in the mid-90s. And I'm in the weird position of not being much of a consumer. I don't like buying things. And so naturally, not being a consumer, I'm going to be hostile to Silicon Valley because that is basically consumerism on steroids. Also, being a writer who takes care with language and tries to express complete thoughts in a sentence or in a piece of writing, I'm very frustrated with what has happened to political and intellectual discourse in this country because of digital media. Trump's election merely being the proof that I was right. This is horrible. This is ruining us, this technology. It's ruining the country. It's ruining people's heads. So yeah, there's some things I would say generally anti-consumerist, anti-big tech, pro-conservation. Those are my 3 points of engagement with the world.
When we talk about internet and social media, at what way is it related to the literature culture?
I think it's fundamentally hostile. I think people are starting to see this. It was very gratifying. Salman Rushdie now agrees with me about Twitter. It's stupid, it's a waste of time, and now it's clearly been proven to be extremely dangerous as well. But what's remarkable is how long it's taking writers to figure out that this medium is really antithetical to what literature has always been. It's early times. People are starting to see. I wish there was more of a movement against Amazon, but everybody is addicted to the convenience of Amazon, so people will get there later. And when it comes to the environment, people are starting to face facts, which is the planet is going to change to something almost unrecognizable in the next 100 years. It's going to be unbelievably catastrophic, violent, and destabilizing. That is what we are looking at. For a pessimistic person, I have this weird optimism.
You're very optimist for a pessimistic person.
Well, exactly, because I think people get carried away, and I have some unique features as a person. One thing, I spend all day thinking about stuff. Another is I'm not a consumer. I don't have kids. Ever since the corrections, I don't have to worry about money. So I think about a lot of this stuff, and I get impatient. Why can't other people see this? My good friends of mine tell me, other people don't enjoy bad news as much as you do. People are frightened. They don't want to think about these things. They just want what's easy and pleasant. And it is, of course, an occupational hazard of being a writer. You are there to bring you're there to bring the news, and often the news is unpleasant. And the news about human nature is not good.
In your first novel, The 27th City, you say you were dreaming about changing the world. So obviously you stopped dreaming a lot, but what's your dream today?
It is a conviction of mine that if a good writer has fun creating a book, a good reader will have fun reading it. And I'm trying to make something that someone will enjoy.